Comics begins right now.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Craft of Comics. My name is Jake, your host for today. Today we have Ryan Winn here. He's an inker for Valiant under Divinity, XO Man of War, and Book of Death, The Fall of Ninjak. So if you guys get a chance, check those out. Today we're going to be going over inking, so don't forget to get your workbook if you don't have it already. Sorry for shaking, but get your workbook. It's really cool. It's got the official entry page on the back, so it's really awesome. Pretty awesome. So don't miss out your opportunity to enter the ultimate prize, and you can be published in a Valiant comic. So that's pretty cool. So what we're gonna do is, of course, like last week and the week before, just ask Mr. Ryan a couple of questions, and then he's gonna show us a couple of tricks. He's got some really cool artwork for us today, so we'll cover that, and then at the end we'll go over some of the questions from the Twitter live Q&A. So submit your questions now. I'll try to go through all of them. I'm sorry if I can't get to all of them, but we'll try to go through and just pull some questions. So yeah. Oh, submit them to #ValiantLiveQA. So be sure that that's your hashtag, and then I'll pull them from here. So we'll just get into the questions. Or first, I guess we should talk about you.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for Valiant, and what you're here to show us today.
Well, I'm an artist by trade, and my day job, I ink for Valiant Comics, and I mostly am inking their penciler Trevor Hairsine, who is a phenomenal superhero artist. Actually, I shouldn't label him as just a superhero artist. He can kind of do anything, but right now he's working on superheroes for Valiant, which I feel is like, not just because I work for them, but as a comic reader, I feel like this is the new home for the superhero dynamics. You know, if you're looking for those things that you loved in old comic books, it's all in Valiant right now. And they've got the best writers, the best artists, the best team of editors. Everything's going on great there right now. So that's my quick plug for Valiant. But yeah, so we're going to be explaining sort of the inking process today, why it exists, what it is, why we do it, and how it's done. And I'm sure you've got some questions that you are ready to ask me, and I can just be inking while we do this.
Absolutely, sure.
And
so if you want to talk about the piece, we'll switch over.
Okay.
If you want to talk about the piece and what it is, and then I'll just ask you the questions.
Okay.
Sweet.
So what we've got here, this is a page from that I'd already inked previously for a printed issue that's already been published. This is from Divinity 2. Pencils are by Trevor Hairsine, script by Matt Hint, and this is a page where the superhero team in the Valiant universe has come to face off against the character Divinity, which is a new character this year. And so the reason I chose this page is, you know, it's got a little bit of texture with the plants, a little bit of tech with the jet in the background, and these different characters, different scales and sizes and textures and things like that, as well as just being an overall powerful image.
Yeah, it looks great. You guys should see this. It's really cool. So I'll just jump into a couple of questions. At what point does an inker enter the comic creating process? Do you receive the script at the same time as a penciler does, or do you just join in afterwards, or do you have any, like, when are you introduced into the script?
It depends on the editor. It's different all the time. Usually you'll be brought in fairly early. I mean, you'll know about the project. You'll be teamed up with the penciler and the colorist. Sometimes I don't get scripts. A lot of times I spent years where I didn't read a script at all. When I was at DC, I would read scripts sometimes after I worked on the project. But I like I tend to, let's see, I've been lucky enough the past few years to work on books that I would be reading if I was not working on them. So I like to still be a little bit surprised. So if I need if something's confusing in the script or in the storytelling or the pencils, I'll go to the script. But a lot of times I'd wait till I was done so that I still got to be a fan, sort of the book I'm working on. And also I've been really lucky to work with pencilers that, let's say, a good penciler will give you all the information. You don't need the script to explain everything. You know, good penciler, everything's there. And I like to just roll off that energy and things like that, where like it's more important for a colorist, because a colorist needs to know it's 2 in the afternoon as opposed to it's 10 in the morning.
Okay.
Or things like that for certain color switches or certain moods or dynamics. But for as far as inking, if you got the right penciler, everything's there. The composition, the lighting, the staging, the framing, everything is there. All the information. I don't need to do any research or reading or anything like that. I can just go in and complete the illustration.
You just do your thing.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So what does inking add to the penciled art? So just based off of from a good penciler into this, what do you feel that it also adds to it?
Well, inking, it goes back, you'll hear a lot of history of inking from people, and that has to do with publishing comics. And in a sense it does. Back in the day when they were photographing the artwork, you couldn't photograph and publish or print the pencil work. There had to be something to clarify it. But inking goes back so much further than that artistically, because it's, everyone's always drawn in pencil and then finished their sketches in ink, because it adds a permanence. And it adds time permanence, because the pencils will fade, things will dust. You're just adding carbon and lead or some similar things to paper that will eventually flake off. Whereas you add ink and it brings a permanence to the artwork and to the piece. And not only is there a physical permanence, but there's also a permanence in the reader's head, in the visual cortex, where you're taking in all of this information. The eyes and the brain, they pick up contrast first. Mm-hmm. So the white and the black, it's going to leave that image in your head. And since comics is all comics is all subliminal storytelling, so inking works right into that. So you're just clarifying the image that the penciler has. So you're getting this chunk of story, and you're clarifying a chunk of story, is really all you're doing, and you're making it permanent in the reader's mind. So as they move from image to image, they have this sequence of events that makes a story for them.
And that's kind of along the lines of guiding the reader's eye, correct?
Yeah, that's all part of guiding. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. Take it.
Guiding the reader's eye. If we had a different page, maybe I can do an example here. Because Trevor is one of the masters of leading the eye around a page. And it's all about where he puts the point of focus and kind of what information he puts leading you to that focus.
Right.
So say we've got, this page here. We'll get that on camera. And obviously our character Ninjak, he's being surrounded by robots, and he stands out here. But the image, this is all blank up here, so you're not really going to focus on any of that except for the sword, which stands out because it's by itself up there. So then you've got this pile of robots, coming up to him, and you look down, you see him first, you see the sword floating, and then you can't help but follow all these pile of robots. You see this big robot here, and then it takes you back up with more big robots, almost like it's one shot, like in a film. Like the camera has brought us back, and it's coming up to see that he is now kicking out. So it's such a similar shot here and here. But you still, so then we're coming up here, we're kicking out, and we're immediately following a robot that's been kicked, and then he's moved up and out. So you see the flow of how Trevor's informed you. And then the lettering works, I don't want to say against, because it's working with, but it crosses over in a way, so that it kind of unifies the entire image. And then you can't, look at this page here, you can't help but follow his movements. Here he even pulls the sword back to thrust this way, but you still get that feel of it here. It's pulled back and then forward thrust into it. And this takes years. This isn't just, you don't I'm going to draw a comic book. Like Trevor has been working on this kind of storytelling for years and years, and it looks so simple. It's deceptively simple.
So people who have, I guess, years and years of reading comics, that's kind of just a natural thing for them not even to realize, right?
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of people that the average reader who's not an artist and not really, looking into the process of things like that, oh, is that you?
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. That's great.
Before you started explaining, my eyes did that, and then as you were explaining too, I was like, oh yeah, that's totally what I did.
Yeah, and it really is. It's such a difficult thing to appreciate. A lot of readers, I think they love a comic or they love a story, and they can't maybe tell you exactly what made them love it. I liked the story where it did this or that, but the effect, everything that makes you feel something, is all the subliminal stuff that he does. Where are things placed? How are they proportioned to the scene and the shot and the panel? and it's all about making you subliminally pick up on all that stuff and just be part of the story.
Natural.
Yeah, and not be saying things to yourself like, "Oh, look, my eye is moving down here." You know, it's got to be automatic.
Cool. So, what made you want to become an inker? Like, when was the time that you were like, "That's a really cool process. That's probably something I want to do for the rest of my life"?
There's nothing I want to do for the rest of my life. But I like inking quite a bit. Inking was part of the art process for me. As a kid, my parents were artists, my grandparents were artists. I was kind of surrounded by artists, and inking was just part of doing a drawing. So I had learned all about it early on and finishing my artwork. And when I was in my early 20s, I was working at an art store in Orange County, California. And this guy came in and was looking for some comic supplies, or comic art supplies, and my friend that worked there that usually helped this guy was too busy, and he's like, "Hey, you're into comics, you want to help this guy?" It's like, all right, you know, I was working retail, I'm early 20s, I was like, all right, I'll go help a customer. And lo and behold, it was this guy named Danny Mickey, who at the time was a big-time inker for Todd McFarlane's book Spawn. And he was working on Spawn, and he was opening up an inking studio. And he knew, I mentioned that I was into comics, and at the time, this is just over 10 years ago, at the time, and comics history leading up to this time, you kind of learned how to ink before you penciled. So if you got into the comic industry, you started out inking backgrounds and inking for other people as you were learning the trade, as you were learning the craft and things like that. So I was telling him that, I wanted to be a comic artist, and if being an inker is how you step into that, I would like to work for his studio. And I eventually got to his studio, and I worked on Spawn for a while, and I realized how much fun I was having finishing other people's drawings. Because I like to make things. That's my thing as an artist, is I like to make things. So I like to build things. I used to build displays. My dad makes signs, and my brother's a sign guy too. So we like to make things, and as an inker, I was able to make all these things that weren't my art necessarily, but I was part of the process. Right. And it was really fun and a really fulfilling way to work my way into the industry and learn what it was about without having to actually do my own art or anything like that. It was just finishing other people's things. And not that it's super easy. You have to learn, it's hard. You have to learn all the skills and all the tools and all the tricks and everything like that. But for me, it was just that fun in the variety and getting to be a part of so many different things in comics.
Yeah, cool. So how much interaction do you have with the penciler, typically?
I tend to not communicate that much with my pencilers, depending on the project. Like there's been times where I've worked on projects when I worked at Top Cow that was near my house in Southern California. So I would go into the studio and work with the penciler multiple times a week. And that was really fun and informative, and you get to be good friends. But then I had equally good creative relationships with pencilers that I never spoke to via email. Like some of the guys I worked with at DC, we had great relationships on the board, on the page. We never spoke, but I got everything he wanted from that, and he would love everything I was doing, and we wouldn't talk at all. Now at Valiant, I didn't talk to Trevor very much for the beginning of Divinity, and actually the colorist on there too, David Barron, we kind of all were doing our own thing, and we liked so much what the person before us was doing that we almost didn't want to talk about it, because we wanted us to each have our own kind of take on it. Right. And early on, Trevor had even told me, he's like, I like your inks, just do what you're going to do. And he has very little direction for David Barron as well in colors, because David's going to pick up on everything. David's fantastic. So now Trevor and I we talk a few times a week, and it's very little about the artwork. Cool. Like he'll send me the page, and I'll make a couple comments about it, but we'll talk about, like what comics you're reading or what convention you're going to, or little things like that. So we have a friendly exchange. We don't talk much about the piece until after I've inked it, and then we'll go over what he liked or what he didn't like. And
it's pretty amazing to have that kind of, I guess, collaboration, and not needing all that communication before too.
Yeah, it is. It's part of trusting who you're, and that's one of the things, like working with Valiant, I don't worry about who they're going to get to color my work. They're going to find a solid colorist that I like.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the case of Valiant, I've been friends with many of their colorists, like before and since working for Valiant. So that's always just fun for me, working with colorists that I'm friends with. But they're going to bring people together that trust what the other person is doing. So there's not a lot of, when I was younger, when I was coming up in the industry, there would be a lot of notes from pencilers. It's like, I want you to do it more like this, or I want this, or I want this. And it's like, I was new and I was still learning the ground, so I was totally fine. And I'm still fine taking notes, but I don't get as many notes these days. I pretty much, my pencilers trust me to do what I'm going to do. And they also know that if they don't like what I'm doing, they can come to me and we can switch it up.
Cool.
Like, no problem.
So what types of pens or brushes do you use? Like, what are you using now, or what do you usually use when you're working?
So I do work traditionally. I love computers. I love digital painting. I'm on Photoshop constantly. But like I said, I like to make things. It's important to me to make things.
Hands-on.
Physical things. Yeah. And so I love these tools, and I've got a variety of tools here. Today I'm using a Deleter brand, which they actually make these. They're mostly used for manga artists.
Okay.
And they're sold... I get them from a company in Japan, and I use their nibs as well. It's a great consistent nib. I also use a Hunt 102, which is the classic Crow Quill pen. These are a little more inconsistent, but they tend to be sharper, so I keep them on hand for things like faces and stuff like that. Now the Deleter's it's a top-notch piece of machined metal that always gives me what I want and delivers consistently. And with the nib, you can get just a variety of lines. Whereas if I was using, say, markers or pens to ink this, like felt pens or something like that, I have to switch from size to size. So right now I'm inking this heavy contour line on the Eternal Warrior's hood, and I want that to be a little thicker, a little heavier. And if I was inking with markers, like I said, I'd have to switch to the fine tip or use the side of the marker, where with this flexible pen, I can now go in and do the seam lines that are very thin. And it's just a little less pressure. And that's all it is. It's just pressure on the pen, and you get a variety of line weights. And I also get all the line weights in between these two, where if I was using markers, again, I only get those 4 or 5 line weights, and you can do fantastic work. I love working with markers too. I do all kinds of stuff, but when I'm doing heavy illustrated pieces like this, it really calls for a variety of line weights and textures, and I can get that easily from this pen. Where if I was working digitally, I could do that as well, but I'm constantly having to switch the tool to do things, where this is just switching pressure and angle and things like that. And then I also use sable hair brushes, Klinsky sable hair brushes, and these are all natural. I've used some synthetics, but the naturals they do everything I want to do. They have the right spring, they hold the right amount of ink, they clean up properly. If you take care of them, they're real hair, so if you take care of them like they're real hair, condition them at night and wash them out, they'll last you a long time. I tend to be pretty rough on my brushes. We'll do some brush samples here too while we're talking about it. Now the brush provides just as much variety, actually more variety than the pen, because we'll flip it over and we can see some of my warm-up brush examples that I do. I always do this on the back of boards as I warm up, because just like with in art, it's so much like sports. I have so many sports analogies for how I deal with this stuff, and one of them is the warm-up. So many guys don't warm up, and it's so important to warm up. Like, you've never gone to a basketball game and the team isn't out there warming up, doing little shots, and they'll do their layups, they'll do little shots, and stretching. Actually, stretching just as important. So they'll do the little shots, and then you move out to a little bit further, 10-foot, 15-footer shots, and then you move to the 3-point line, and you'll start just launching those away. And even just doing this stuff, my analogy for sports is it's almost like throwing a ball or shooting a hoop. I need to get here, and I'm starting here with something. So it's either like a straight line, or I need to arch that, or it's all about conveyance, getting one thing to the other. So in my head, I grew up playing sports and doing art, so I always saw saw them as similar things. So I always recommend to people just warm up. Just spend 15 minutes warming up, and then when you get to the art piece, boom, you're ready to go. You're
ready.
rocking and
Yeah.
rolling. There's no
You're nice and
oh
warm.
yeah, there's
You're making them shots.
yeah, you're exactly making those shots. You want to be the team player that gets out there and sinks those shots, not the guy who's like, oh, my arms are tight, I'm not warmed up, and things like that. So,
and that's another thing too, right? So whenever you're not just following the line, but you're also knowing where you're going to end.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you have the, I'll do a thin, like you have a pencil line like that. Yeah, I do know I have to go there, but say this was like the knee or something on someone's pants, like, oh, I know I have to like
Give it more
not
of a
just get there, but I've got
definition.
to make that a little thicker. Maybe there's like a little fold or wrinkle that comes over there or something like that. So it's not just about destination. It's also about the journey.
Yeah.
So, and what I was saying about the brush and variety, and I can show that here is, so, I can do super thin lines, like razor thin lines if I want. And then I can turn the brush any number of degrees from here to here and just get all sorts of different shapes and textures and things like that. So, if I'm doing like some rocks, I can dry brush it out on the side like this and scribble in some shading and things like that. Or if I'm doing, say I'm doing an eye, I can get a nice thin line, get some eyelashes, get our eyeball in there.
It's so mesmerizing.
Pupil,
I'm like,
bottom lash, and then I can go thick for some of those, and then say for the eyebrow, are we getting this on camera? Sorry, here. And then for eyebrow, just another brush variety. You can go thin, and then you can go into thick where the eyebrow gets thicker and things like that. Say she's got some wrinkles under her eyes. We'll do an old lady, so I can do some dry brush. And see, this is all just one tool, just different application for each step. And say she's heavy in shadow, and we go in and make her a little more noir. A little shade on the eye, bigger pupil. So it's dark, so just use the side of the brush, and then you've got all of your shadows, nose. And you just start creating things with shapes. And with the brush, I love drawing with a brush. Drawing with a brush, you can get all these different varieties and then create a face. It's kind of turned into a man now. We've got cross-gender guy here. We're thinking. He doesn't know what he is. But see, just with one tool, I can do this variety. Say
Right.
it is a man. Or we can switch tools here. We can go back to the nib. Say since it is a guy, we do super thin lines. Oh, sorry, here we go. You can do some super thin lines and do like stubble. You can get a variety, again, of lines, and then go back to shading and do everything like that. So I just have fun with, I try to keep things as simple as possible. So I have basically two tools, a couple varieties of pen, a couple varieties of brush, but it's basically the same thing, and I can do all of this with those few things.
cool. So when you do digitally, is that what you stick to? Is just Photoshop? And then what kind of are you on like a tablet or huge?
I don't have a big setup. I don't even know the size of my monitor. It's yay big. My monitor's yay big, and I run a small bamboo tablet. And you can do digital inking. You can do it through Photoshop. I don't like the way it looks. You can do it through Manga Studio. It's a little bit better. Manga Studio is a different program. It's similar to Photoshop, but specifically designed for comic books. So it's layout your pages, do your pencils on this layer, inks on the. It's all set up just for making comic books and manga, and you can ink in that really cleanly. Very nice lines. The systems actually even help you clean up your line a little bit, which some people feel is cheating, but whatever. People make you want to make your art, and if you do
Right.
it digitally, you got a few more tricks up your sleeves that you can use. But yeah, a lot of people tend to actually use something like a Cintiq tablet where they're drawing on the screen when you're doing that. That's much easier for digital inking. I have a little bit of a hard time doing it with the tablet on the pencil because it's just, the tablet to the monitor. You're off a little bit where, I'm used to doing stuff on paper. I was trained this way, so everything's precise and exact. And so yeah.
Cool. So speaking of tricks, I know you cut. Is there anything, I guess, that you can share with somebody that wants to get into inking, like the types of tools that they should use when they start out? What are some small tricks and tips here and there that they can probably start practicing with?
Okay, that's great. I love helping people start out. It's a weird craft. It confuses people. The medium, not just the medium, but the products you use, things like that. I use an ink that I do not recommend for up-and-comers. I use Speedball pigmented acrylic black ink. It's a super pigmented acrylic black ink, so it's almost like a watered-down acrylic paint. It's thicker, it's heavier, it's really difficult for people to use. I recommend people starting out, they use things like Higgins Super Black. It's more watery, it's easier to use, and really you gotta sample different inks. Everyone's got their own. Me and a couple of the guys I've been studio mates with, we've used different inks to do the same kind of things, and I'll try his ink and I can't work with it. And he'll try my ink and he can't work with it. But we can work with each other's or our own inks and make very similar looking pieces.
Right.
So with ink, I just tell people start off if you're starting off something like Higgins or something simple that you can just get at Aaron Brothers or any art store, Michael's, anything like that. Try it out. And you have to buy a bunch of nibs. If you're using the Crow Quill nib, say this Hunt 102, you have to buy a bunch because they won't always be sharp, things like that.
Okay.
The first one may not work. Sometimes there's a little bit of oil on it. This is the thing I always get from up-and-comers is I'm dipping the nib in the ink and I'm trying to use it and it's not flowing off, or it's not. Sometimes there's a little bit of oil because it's machined, it's punched out, it's it's grease, it's going through the stuff. Just wipe a little bit of that oil off, holds the ink better.
Wow.
Things like that, no one ever tells you stuff like that. I always get people coming to me at shows and they're just so frustrated. And I'm like, just wipe off a little of the oil.
That's all
Even
you
if
gotta
just
do.
put it in
That's
your
all
mouth
you gotta
and then wipe it off and it should be fine. Otherwise, it's a bad nib. Move on to the next nib. Whereas Deleter, I recommend anyone that buys the Deleter products, just buy one pack of them and they'll last you for a really long time. They're really good. Brushes, you have to go big on brushes. You have to go for nice brushes. And if you go cheap, you will just frustrate yourself.
These are like the shoes when in sports.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You gotta have either good high top, something that's gonna support you properly on the court, or if you're on the field, you've got to have that right kind of traction.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're gonna be slipping and sliding all over the place. And I tried for years getting cheap brushes, and these they don't cost more than $20 a brush, but it sounds a lot. And if you're younger, you're up and coming, that's $20 to go spend on one thing.
Right.
Is a lot of money, but in the long run, it's much more worth it. I spent so much more money on crappy synthetic brushes because they were cheap. Like, I'll just buy this one. And then I had to buy a new one because it just wasn't working right. So, go big. I like the Raphael brand myself over Winsor & Newton. A lot of people like Winsor & Newton, but the Raphaels I found are extremely consistent and priced well.
Awesome. So, I guess here in a second we can get into the Twitter Q&A, but I know that we talked about this earlier, the question for people to maybe win this piece.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to think about the question, I'll look at the Twitter questions. So if you haven't, submit your questions now. We'll start
get those
looking
questions
at them.
in. I need interesting
Anything.
questions. Nobody asks me interesting questions when I go places.
So it looks like we have 17.
All right.
That's pretty cool. Let's see. Our Craft of Comics BFF, Dan, who is pretty awesome. So, hey, Dan.
Hey,
Welcome
Dan.
back. He wants to know, what was it like working on Valiant Comics Divinity, and any hints for the next one?
Oh, any hints? Well, I just got a bunch of stuff today, a bunch of information today that I don't know if I can share. The only thing I can say is if you liked the first series of Divinity, you're gonna love the ideas that are coming towards us in Divinity 2. I have been reading very little, just like I did with the first one. I got the first script for Divinity 1, and I was so in love with it that I had to stop reading the rest of the scripts. Like, I'd only read little parts to make sure I was kind of on track, because the ideas that Matt was throwing out there were just so fantastic. I wanted to wait and be part of the comic reading group that got to experience that. But working on Divinity was also an incredible experience. I can't say that about every project. and I'm not just saying that, in a hyperbolic sense. But I don't know, there were parallels. As an artist, you always want to find parallels between what you're working on and your life. There's analogies and lessons in everything. And there were so many analogous things going on for me. I got the first script for Divinity 1, and I felt like I was Abram, the character in the first Divinity, who had been asked by his country to take on this giant task that was going to be, really important. And I sort of felt like, I was like, cool, I feel like him. Where like Valiant came to me with this really important project, and they were like, hey, are you willing to take this on? It's going to take you weird places, and it's going to do weird things to you. And so I went with that vibe, and I tried to identify with Abram through the whole series as I was working on it. Also, when you're staring at a page for 10 to 12 hours a day, you get really invested in the characters, and you get to know these characters because you're hanging out with them all day long. And that was something I didn't think about when I started inking, was your involvement and with the characters, and how important some of these characters would become to me while I'm working on them. So I feel like not only am I the curator of the pencils, but I'm the curator of these characters' stories, and I get to be there as Abram's heart is broken, and he's telling his wife that he has to fly to space for years and things like that. And now I feel like I'm getting off topic as I'm having fun inking and thinking. But yeah, working on Divinity, it was challenging because we were pushing a deadline the whole time, but we also wanted this to be just a top-notch art book. Matt brings an amazing set of ideas to the script, and then Trevor brings these ideas to life in a way that no other artist can. And when you get these pages every week, it fills you with so much excitement. At first, I was nervous because everyone's giving me such good stuff. I gotta be as good as all of this. And then once you get into your groove and you're comfortable, it becomes a really fun, exciting process. And waiting for those next pages can be a really fun time of anticipation.
The next question is from Cap Falcon 6798.
Hey, Cap Falcon.
What is the most important aspect to pay attention to when inking?
Let's keep it simple. We'll use one word: focus. You need to focus on clarifying the image so that the reader can focus on the important parts. So the message has to be delivered. So this is an easy page to show the message being delivered on. I didn't have to do anything on a page like this to fix it, but there are pages that I'll get from an artist that say, we have we have Eternal Warrior here coming at us, and it's very clearly defined. You see his axe, his arm, everything is very clearly defined. Where if by this shadow, if we had like a black building or a black set of trees there, all of a sudden the reader would be going, it's trees behind him. They have to stop and think. So it's things like that. Like if that was there, I would have to find a way to make that less of an obstacle. So it's because the storytelling is him coming at us, not a thing here. So it's all about making sure that the focus is there. I tend to think faces and hands are the most important. That's what's the most important in acting, whether screen or stage. It's what are you doing with your hands and your face, and that's where all your emotion is. So I tend to want to clarify and make as clear as possible the hand gestures and the facial expressions, and stick to what they had, because Trevor emotes like crazy through his hands and faces of all his characters. And that's something that, that's the acting. That's what's delivering our story here, is the hands and faces. So clarify those, make those the best. Yeah, I mean, look at that. He's got his fist is ready for action, and this hand is leading the way. Like it's even that, just that simple storytelling of here's the leader leading the way with this hand, fist ready to punch if need be, but look at the calm, quiet, determined look on his face. And that's all, where the body, that suggests everything too, but the emotional acting is done in hands and faces. So I tend to focus on those first, and then focus on the clarity of the image, to make sure that message is brought through.
Awesome.
And focus on not getting ink everywhere. That's the biggest problem.
You're doing good so far.
So far, so good. I'm
Compared to
splashing
what
a
you
little
were
on the
telling us
table.
earlier?
It'll clean up.
Yeah.
But.
So you're doing good. Shadow Sip, what character are you excited to tackle next?
Okay, let's see. At Valiant, I've been really lucky this year. At Valiant, I got to touch Unity and Divinity. I got to deal with Divinity, who's a new character that's fantastic. There were certain characters in EXO, like the Vine creatures I got to deal with. Oh, Archer and Armstrong.
Ooh.
I love Archer and Armstrong, and those are probably my favorite characters after Quantum and Woody, are Archer and Armstrong. And my first project with Valiant was a Quantum and Woody project, which was with Christopher Priest and Doc Bright, the original creators of the project, which was a real special treat to be able to come in to work for Valiant, to work with the characters I love, and to be able to work with the guys that created the book. That was a lot of fun. I would like to do more Quantum and Woody. I would like to work on some Quantum and Woody with James Asmus, who you had on week 1, who I feel is one of the best comedic comic writers out there. And that's also
He's pretty great.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the hardest jobs in comics is writing comedy. Drawing comedy it's almost impossible. So the few guys that can really do it, they do a really good job. I admire them. But I'd like to work with Punk Mambo. Shadow Man would be fun. Really, I eventually would like to touch the whole Valiant universe, but my favorites are Quantum Woody and Archer and Armstrong.
There's some really good questions coming through. I'm trying to find.
All right, that's what we like.
Some.
Good questions.
There's some asking about some of the books, and I don't want to give away any. What's it called?
No spoilers?
Yes.
Okay.
So this one, Shadow Sip again, is asking, when inking Book of Death Fall of Ninjak, we saw Ninjak fall, but another popular hero also fell. And what was your reaction to it?
That's funny. I was actually talking to some of the guys from Valiant about that today because I wanted to draw an image that was similar to the Fall of Ninjak cover, which, here, we'll show it on the front camera here. Oh, wait, we're going back. Here we go. So similar to this, I want to do an image with Ginger in this place, because when I read the book, I was moved by Ninjak's actions, but I was also moved by Ginger's actions. You know, she's an alien who's come to this planet, and she's willing to die for what is right cosmically, not because she's human or because she's from this country or that country or anything. She's like, well, the right thing to do is to try to save Earth.
Right.
And I'm going to help Ninjak do that. And to me, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm totally moved by Ninjak's decision. But like, to me, this was the fall of Ninjak and Ginger. And I was just like, oh, Ginger. So I was equally moved, if not more moved, by the actions of Ginger in this issue.
So when you don't read a script, do you have your reaction before or after? I'm sure it's before, whenever you see the whole.
Well, this one, it was more when I got the final book. Like, so I was inking the pages, and I hadn't read the full script because I wanted to be surprised, like I said. So I got to the pages, and I could see what was going on and what Ginger was doing. But when you got to the words that Matt put into the script, where, you know, she's very calm and stoic and has a mission to do, and unemotionally is going to do that mission. And it got to me more when I was reading it, because I was like, oh man, this character, so much heart from a robot.
So another question, do you adapt your style to mesh with the artist? Do you have certain things you do no matter what the artist is, or who the artist is?
That's a great question. Who asked that question?
That was from Comic 23.
Good question, Comic 23. A lot of inkers would have a lot of different answers for this. When I started out, I had few techniques that I used and a few styles that I'd been taught, so everything and everyone just kind of got those techniques. And as I got older, got better, learned to adapt a little more, and started mixing my art with other artists, I learned that I can change my inking style to fit the penciler better. And my goal became to My original goal was, I want people to know that I've inked this. I inked this. You can tell because this or that. Now I want people to think that the penciler inked it. I want it to be such a pure interpretation of what the penciler was trying to achieve that people will assume that the penciler had to ink it. And then if they have to look up that it was my name, then that's cool. But if I can take my bows from backstage, then I'm fine with that. Then I've done my job.
That's pretty awesome. So I'm going to take one last question, and this one seems very, very intriguing.
Okay.
But any other questions after this can be answered through your Twitter, which is...
at Ryan Winn.
Okay. So sorry if we didn't get to your question, but Ryan...
Feel free. Everybody, hit me up with your questions. It'll be a slow answer today because we're at a convention after this, but please feel free to ask questions. I love answering stuff.
So this question is from Shadowman 2012. What did you have for lunch?
I had a breakfast burrito for lunch.
So that's all the time we have for the Valiant Live Q&A. Get updates from us because we're going to try to give this away. Do you have your question?
Oh, I'm supposed to ask the question. Yeah. I thought we were picking, I thought somebody was going to give us, that's such a good question that they get that. Oh, so I'd have to ask a question, a trivia question of some type? Oh, geez. That's kind of tough.
If you can't think of it now, we can do it later. But
I almost want to see if whoever comes up with a question for me later today, I want to pick the question of the day. So send Hastings and Ryan Winn your questions, and what I think is the most interesting question, you'll get this piece. It may not be finished. We're just going to finish parts of it, but you'll get what's left of it, and I'll try to do a little bit more to it as well.
Pretty cool.
So yeah, let's do that. Best question of the afternoon gets this piece.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it.
This was a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of fun. I've just two dudes in a hotel room.
Hey, that's how it goes sometimes.
All right, guys. Thanks for catching this episode of Craft of Comics. Check back next week when we sit with David Barron. It'll be 2 hours later, so make sure you check with your local store time. And any updates we have, keep up to date with it on Facebook or anything. So thank you.